And we're live.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Dungeon Master Storytime, episode 7. And following our episode last week on evil characters, we're going to be talking today about antagonists. So, I guess the question that's first appropriate is who is your favorite antagonist? Benefactor?
Me? It's twofold. Two sides of the same coin. My favorite antagonist is, depending on which way you're looking at it, is Light from Death Note or L from Death Note, as they consider each other antagonists based on what their plans were for the series. So for Light, he wanted to be quote unquote the god of the new world and kill murderers and prisoners using a book called the Death Note. L was opposed to this as he was a little more close to the side of the law, even though he did things that were very, as one could say, not right in the justice system, as using God as a sacrificial pawn to catch this killer, meaning he let a prisoner get killed just to try to see where Light was. And both of them go about the entire series trying to uncover who the other is and to be the first one to stop the other one. And depending on which viewpoint you're looking from, the other serves as their antagonist, which is why I like Death Note. And so for them, they're what I consider my favorite antagonist because you see from two viewpoints. So you don't have you have two protagonists and two antagonists at the same time.
All right, and Crusader, what's your favorite antagonist of all time?
Uh, I would probably easily say Darth Vader. And I first didn't go too much into it. I don't think. I don't remember if we talked too much about it last week with Darth Vader, but uh, Darth Vader is dead set on taking down Luke, dead set on taking down the rebellion. He's a guy who's actively trying to stop this any sort of counter to his idea or to his regime, to his government. He's just determined to shut them down, cut the head off the snake, and assert his dominance. And from that, from his motivations, from his goals, he creates multiple protagonists who are attempting to overcome him as he's like the big boss of a video game, and he's got this raid group of players trying to overtake him and beat him. And like I said, he's just amazing. How about yours, fermented potato?
Hmm. I actually had a really hard time trying to decide that. Um, but I would say that I kind of agree with the benefactor. And the reason why, which I think we'll kind of dig into more as we talk about this subject, but just to lightly touch on it, is that I believe that your antagonist and your protagonist are almost two sides of the same coin in a story. And I think that the story and the dynamic between Light and L perfectly captures that idea, and that's what I really like to see in antagonists, and I think that makes a very very strong uh, character or antagonist and protagonist connection, whether it's done overtly or covertly.
Okay. So you your idea of protagonist antagonist is that they should be a foil to each other or a mirror to each other. Do you prefer foil or mirror?
I would say a bit of both, because in some ways, because they mirror each other, they're going to naturally foil at some points as well. Like they could have similar goals or complete opposite goals, but their behaviors or their methods, or they have something that connects them that is so alike, whether it's their personality. There's been so many examples of this done, but I do think that that is a great way to set them up, just to show that, in essence, like for example, in I do like them to be kind of opposites of the same coin. Like, for example, if you have a party that's for justice, maybe your antagonist is for either chaos or has a different warped sense of justice.
Batman and the Joker.
Sort of, yes.
Okay. Okay.
All right. Now, what is the difference between a villain and an antagonist? I know that you really wanted to ask this, Benefactor, so I'm kind of curious what your answer is.
Right. So for me, the difference between a villain and antagonist, right? Every villain is an antagonist, but not every antagonist is a villain, right? So this is something that me and Crusader had a small private agreement on, in which he's gonna say his statement, but for me we wasn't I full disagree with him, but to say that antagonists can't have evil intentions, I find to be inaccurate. So for a villain is one who has evil or wicked acts and intention that harm others and bring ruin in the process, which is not always the same for antagonists. So there's an overlap between them, which is why I say every villain is an antagonist, not every antagonist is a villain. The antagonist is generally a main obstacle attempt to thwart the protagonist from reaching their goal. But in that, the intent behind the antagonist can be evil, but it may not be on the level of a villain, as you say, bring straight ruin around them. Villain is usually the main focus that drives a plot forward, which not every antagonist always have to be. Antagonist could be, again, some can say the henchman villain that's only there only because he has something to deal with the protagonist. Be something to the backstory. Usually you have this other guy that's there that's not really the one you're after, but the person that they're kind of standing up for. And the only reason that antagonist is there is because they want to settle some score with the protagonist. So that's why for me the difference between a villain and antagonist is that an antagonist can have evil intentions, can do things, but the main thing for them is they are a general force against the protagonist. Sometimes the villain is not. Sorry, we're kind of jumbled there. So sometimes a villain may not even be outright known to people yet, and be that force in the protagonist, but eventually they show up. I said protagonist. Sorry. So for me, that's the difference where they're similar, but it's a very, very fine line that differentiates them.
All right, now Crusader, what was your sort of definition to that?
Well, I would like your definition first before I give mine.
Well, to be honest with you, when I kind of saw your little argument back and forth, or should I say disagreement, I kind of saw both sides of it. So I want to say I'm kind of neutral, but I would say that yeah, I'm not really sure where I sit on that camp. So why don't you go ahead and take over?
Okay, all right. I hearing what Benefactor just said, I feel like we agree. Like that's what's hilarious. It's like after hearing him say that, I'm like, wait a minute. We were essentially saying the same thing.
No, but see, the thing that I don't think you realized what I disagreed with was that you consider antagonist has to have any other intent. And that was the thing and that's why I even said to you, you can have an antagonist with evil intent, but that doesn't make them a villain.
Okay, yeah,
and that's where you called me retarded when you're disagreeing with me. I agree that a villain is someone with evil intent, but I agree an antagonist can have an evil intent, but does not make them the villain.
Okay, so my point, all right, the point of difference, okay, where your antagonist and your villain separate, okay, is it all hinges on evil intent. Okay, now that's not to say that makes your antagonist no longer a villain, okay, or your villain is no longer an antagonist. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying the difference in calling an antagonist a villain hinges on whether or not that antagonist has evil intent. Okay. Contrast, I use the example of a Karen at the shopping mart. Okay. She could be antagonistic, but not evil. Whereas Darth Vader can be antagonistic, but he's also evil. So that's the distinction of what I was trying to get at. So if you're trying to split them down the middle, say here's where they differentiate. Here's where you cross the line. For me, I would say it's evil, or it's intent. Intent is where you cross the line from antagonist, from just being someone who's annoying, to someone who is villainous, someone who's actively trying to harm other people or harm a particular person or whatever that villain's design is or goal. Does that make sense?
Listen, but for me, it's still a small disagreement in that, because to me, again, we're going by the literary. So we're doing this as D&D part. We're going by the literary sense, right? So a villain is someone that wholeheartedly moves the plot. And that's why I said a villain is someone who moves the plot, be it through what we had agreement through evil intent or things that be processed to ruin. An antagonist can have evil intent, but now we have to define what the various evil intents are. My thing is, I think you're saying antagonist is only someone that's annoying. Right? If they didn't have an evil intent, no matter how small that evil intent can be, you consider them a villain. But that's not a disagreement. You can have an evil intent with someone and not be an outright villain. And now we also have to go and look at, now we're considering the scale of villainy to differentiate between antagonist and a villain. And now we're going into a whole different thing. So, like I said, if we're going by the literary definition of villain, that's the base sum of a villain. Someone who does evil action, harm others in the ruin that moves the plot of a story forward. Compared to an antagonist who is just a defined force against the protagonist.
Well,
so they don't have to necessarily move the plot forward, but they are a defined force that is against the protagonist, which can or cannot have evil intentions.
Yeah, I would say, like I said, that. All right, maybe this should be a deciding factor. Do you think a villain can be a protagonist?
That depends on the story you're trying to tell. Which is why I say some people.
Don't go into the depends. Do you think, just yes or no? Do you think it's possible?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think it's possible for a hero to be an antagonist?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's why I draw that line at, it depends on intent. That's what separates the two. All right. I look to Boondock Saints. Okay. In that movie, the protagonists, quote unquote, are the gangsters, and the detective is the antagonist, quote unquote, for that story. Okay. The idea of the protagonist is you're kind of supposed to root for the protagonist, even if the protagonist is horrible, killing people and doing terrible things. The villain, or the antagonist, not the villain, the antagonist is actually, or ideally, doing a good thing. You have instances like, is someone breathing?
Oh, that was me. I just realized that was me. I didn't realize my new mic picked up on that. My apologies.
Sorry. Yeah. So, where you take something like Watchmen, where the quote unquote heroes are all terrible people. They're all terrible people, but they're still protagonists within their own stories. And they're against an antagonist or a villain who's a hero that turns into a villain and is more of a antagonist throughout the entire story. But his intentions are good. His intentions are to fix the whole universe, or fix the whole crisis with humanity killing each other.
Okay, but then by that very thing you're saying that, but his actions in the process, no matter how justified you can consider them, right, have brought and inflicted harm and created ruin in the process, which literally is what a villain does. And that act is also what drives the plot forward. So his good intentions still led to the process that inflicts harm and created ruin in the process, right?
Yeah.
So you consider him a villain.
Yeah.
But you also said that he is an antagonist, right?
Correct.
But you said that if he has good intentions, he shouldn't be a villain.
No, I'm saying the intent part, that's the deciding factor of when you cross the line. Okay? Like, you can have your twirly mustache, you can go ahead and murder people and do whatever it is. The intent is where it the intent versus harm. That's the technical term I use. Intent versus harm. That's the hinge
Yeah, but that's
to the
you
entire circumstance.
weighing a
That's
scale
what
there.
depends on whether or not the person. Yes.
Okay, definitely. Okay, so that's you weighing the scale there. So that for you, then I'm going with the literary. I agree with the literary sense of it. It doesn't matter what justifications they have. It is the end result of pretty much them moving the plot forward with an action that inflicts harm or create ruin. Where an antagonist is someone who is attempting to thwart the protagonist from reaching their goal, and it's usually a defined opposition force, which can end up being a villain, but doesn't necessarily have to be a quote villain.
Yeah. Here, Niraj in chat. He wants to chime in here. Deeds tend to have more to do with defining evil versus not evil. Ozymandias is a perfect example of that. His actions in saving the world killed millions. He intentionally did something evil. This is correct. We've both seen Watchmen. I don't know if you've read the comic or not. I think I've read the comic years ago, and I hated it. I fucking hated the comic. It's like not good in my opinion. I know a lot of people love it. A lot of comic book readers love it. I personally don't. And I like Alan Moore. I like Alan Moore's writing. It's just that comic it didn't resonate with me. And then he says, his plot to save the world ended in the deaths of millions. Correct. Right. So it's like, I'm going to save the world at the cost of wiping out a huge chunk of the population. To me, that's again, it goes to like his intent is, oh, I'm going to unite the world. I'm going to save the world. So his intent is to be good. But when you take that intent and you measure it against harm, how much damage has this done to the environment? And when I say environment, I mean like the entire ecosystem, to the population, the societies, the cultures, all of these things. Okay, the livestock, all of it. How much damage was caused by that? And that to me is what I use as my metric for intent versus harm. Someone else might do something different. I was talking to someone last night about this conversation this debate you and I had, and his metric was completely different. His metric was he used intent versus the moral code of that society. So if the society said it's perfectly fine to do what Ozymandias did, then it would be fine. The deaths of millions was perfectly justified, and it's a good thing. It's a holy thing, or whatever, that society believed. And I disagreed with him on that. But, if he's going with the literary definition of good and evil, what is an evil act? It's like, oh, well, it's a moral thing. It's a something based on your moral code. Then it's like, okay, if that's your metric, then fine. But to me, I go to more towards the science end of it. I more look at the abstract. I get away from the nuance. I go to nature and I try to follow a natural order of things personally. Niraj again. That's what you call a Machiavellian plot. His philosophy was that the ends justify the means. Correct. Yeah.
But you can't call nature evil. Good and evil has always been something that humanity in itself named and created. This is one of the reasons why people don't like getting into it with the whole alignment system.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's like that's like saying, if you're saying it's on nature, but that's like calling nature in itself something that is good and evil. No, nature simply is.
Let me read something here. This is something that has helped me understand good versus evil. This is a quote, and I know some people are going to throw wine bottles and such at the screen for me saying this quote, and it's kind of a long quote, but just bear with me here. This is from Boba Fett from Tales of the Bounty Hunter. He says, "Everyone dies. It's the final and only lasting justice. Evil exists. It is intelligence in service of entropy. When the side of a mountain slides down to kill a village, this is not evil, for evil requires intent. Should a sentient being cause that landslide, there is evil, and it requires justice as a consequence so that civilization can exist. There is no greater good than justice. Only if the law serves justice is it a good law. It is said correctly that law exists not for the just, but for the unjust. For the just carry the law in their hearts, and do not need to call it from afar. I bow to no one, and I give service only for cause. That's from Boba Fett in Tales of the Bounty Hunter.
Okay, so two things. Again, you earlier said you look to nature and quote science, right? Now,
Yeah.
exactly with that, that is still something made by man design, right? That's still what is given as an opinion by what is a human being. I'm not even talking about Boba Fett. I'm talking about whoever wrote it and that made Boba Fett sage. You know what I'm saying? This is why you're looking
Wait,
at it
say that
as
again?
good and
I
evil.
didn't understand what you just said.
That is still something written by a person, a human, a man, a being that came from society, right? In
Yes.
general. Not right. So that's different from what you said earlier with the whole you look to nature and science, right? That's it is impossible. That has to be that's a nuance. That's a social science. That what that person wrote is based off of his view of society that he made Boba Fett see it. Right? Where he's like, nature
Yeah,
mountain doesn't so that's my thing, which is why I didn't want to go into the good and evil portion in that sense. And that's why this whole thing I wanted to stay with the literary track of it, since we're talking about D&D, which when you're making a world and stuff for your players, that's going to be the big thing. It's going to be a literary section. It's going to be one based on how you built the world and its laws and rules and order that define such quote things as good and evil. Because there you are essentially the god that defines those lines and whatnot. And that's pretty much the gist of my argument is like you can't hard define good and evil because it is always stuck behind what is essentially where you're raised at, how your moral and beliefs are, what has been given to you throughout your nurturing as well, that it's hard to really give that straight line definition of good and evil. You have a bias in that. Again, this goes to me as well. You have a bias in that divide there. So it's always going to be in that sense and opinion, which is why, again, when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons or any table RPG that has you do an alignment system, which is why when you and Ava Dalian had got into it in a debate, and I think it was episode 3, it came down to that same very hinge of good versus evil and that very core disagreement. And that's the thing why I didn't want to get too much into that we give a lot of time getting into that, what is essentially a philosophical debate. You know what I mean? And that's why I'm just trying to keep very much to like the literary sense, which is why I'm not arguing about the saying evil intent or whatnot. Literary sense, you define what that evil intent or ruin is necessarily is. So.
Okay. I see what you're saying. All right, then I'll drop it and I'll let us move on because I don't think we're gonna get anywhere with it.
You're not gonna get with it. This is why at the me or Potato had to cut you in Eve off that time because like we're not getting anywhere with that. It's one of those things that you can argue to ad infinitum and never really ever get anywhere. But this goes to both of you. What makes a good antagonist to you guys?
Well, I would think that what I think makes a good antagonist, I kind of touched on before, was that I like having a duality where you show in some ways that your antagonist may even be similar to the characters in your party, and show those parts as well as highlighting how they may be different as well. Maybe they're not even that different at all. But generally, they should serve as, for example, when I make campaigns, I generally will choose a theme. For example, if that theme is ambition, for example, my antagonist is either going to be someone who is very apathetic and just have a very null, dull opinion of the world, or they're going to be, have their own ambitions that may, in essence, and they should counter what your party is trying to accomplish as well, if the theme is ambition. What about you, Crusader? What do you think makes a good antagonist?
I would say for me, makes for a good antagonist is their ability to counter the players, or the well, I'd say I'm going to use players in this case. Their ability to counter the players. I always factor in. I like war, so I like reviewing like battlefields and things like that and strategies. If you like RTSs, it's a great example of something where when you're fighting an opponent in war, if you're lucky, you have something to counter whatever the enemy throws at you. So the idea of war for the past 1,200 years, people might say longer than that, but I would say for about the past 1,200 years, it's been generally anticipate what the enemy has and try to overcome or counter them with it. So you might not have an immediate reaction to something that the enemy has, but your ability to get that thing you need to counter them is important. So with an antagonist, I'm looking at them as, okay, the players stop them once. How fast are they working on a solution to counter the players? And I include the antagonist's ability or concern of, do they consider the player a threat or not? Do they know the player even exists? If it's a king or a lord, they might not give a crap about the players. If it's a constable or a sheriff or even just a fighter in a tournament, they might see it as, hey, this person has potential. They might observe. They might be again, I'll go with the fighter. Okay. I was thinking of Apollo Creed, by the way, when we were having our little debate, as a great antagonist, fantastic antagonist. If no one's seen Rocky, Apollo Creed is a great antagonist, because he's a guy who pushes his opponent to be better. He wants the best from his opponent. And he's arrogant to believe that no matter what happens, because he is the champion, he is always going to win. And, if you haven't seen Rocky, I'm not gonna spoil it for you, but it's a great example of an antagonist who gets knocked down a peg, even if he doesn't necessarily lose, because there's different ways you can lose and there's different ways you can win. So I hope that answers that question. I hope.
Yeah, I actually really like that answer. I think that it's a really insightful answer, and it gives you an idea that, not all of your antagonists have to be outright evil. And you should provide diversity in your antagonists within, either a single campaign or just in general. But now I want to know what you think, Benefactor.
For me, what makes a good antagonist, like I said, I like foils and mirrors. But for me, to make a good antagonist, I think they should also, in essence, make your hero question themselves and their worldview and create a change within your protagonist. And this goes back to the whole thing from previous podcast where I talked about the 3 different arcs. I feel that a worthwhile antagonist makes a protagonist go through either a positive or negative change of arc. Has some kind of effect upon them. You know what I'm saying? Which is why I say foil mirrors usually work, because it brings about a sudden realization or a change within them to grow, be it both positive or negative. And so to me, that's how I like and enjoy of my antagonist. And I say I don't enjoy the whole, sometimes like the Saturday morning Skeletor kind of villainous antagonist. But my personal preference is ones that have that, where the status quo inside the characters is actually changed in some way, shape, or form.
All right. Well, we all came up with some relatively different answers. So, all right. What is your initial goal you think of when you create an antagonist for a campaign? If either one of you want to answer that first.
Well, I guess we'll piggyback off what I said. Because when my initial goal when I create antagonist or antagonist is again is always what is this personal force bring that is supposed to have an effect on my players. You know, what is it that they're trying to do, and what kind of relationship they have to my players that is going to bring about a most of the case positive growth. But again, I don't mind it ends up with a negative growth, but I attempt to go for a positive growth within my players. So that's always my initial goal. Is you know what I mean, is what purpose do these antagonists serve?
Yeah,
Crusader?
go ahead. I was just gonna say that I actually kind of agree with that what you just said is that your antagonists, um, they definitely should try and like their main purpose is like from a DM's perspective to push and challenge your players. From a narrative sense, they're there to also do that, but especially in this type of game, that's their general purpose. And yeah, I just wanted to say I agreed with you, but go ahead, Crusader, if you would like to answer that.
Well, what I typically look for with my antagonists when I make them, I typically go for the route of how will this help the players? How will this help the players learn the story? Like I take a storyteller's approach, so I use the antagonist to guide the players through the story. Okay, I let the players decide how they want to do their growth, how they want, what lessons they want to learn. Okay. Now, if I have a lesson I'm trying to teach them, I'll come up with different other ways to teach them. But typically all these different things I throw at them are just different ways for them to prepare for the final encounter or for their confrontation with the antagonist. If it's a minor antagonist, it could easily just be a small lesson that I'm trying to teach them. You know, it depends on the severity of the antagonist that I'm pitting them against. I don't know if that even answers the question.
My whole thing is, so then how do you have your players really connect to this antagonist? What connects your players to this antagonist?
That's a good question. Typically, what connects them with the antagonist in my stories, depending on the story, typically it's a quest. It's typically a quest. It's, hey, you have to go here and do a thing. And the antagonist is, that's typically where they encounter an antagonist. You guys have seen, I should say Benefactor, you have seen 2 stories of mine where there was an overarching main antagonist to both stories. But in those stories, there were mini antagonists along the way. Potato, you've seen in one of my games multiple antagonists with one overarching antagonist. But even that's a little bit muddled because there were multiple antagonists within that one antagonistic body. And then in my Star Wars game, there's like there's no major antagonist. You know, it's just antagonists. It's people who are just going from point A to point B, and the choices that people make create antagonists onto themselves. So if you piss off the Empire is going to be your antagonist. If you piss off the rebellion will be your antagonist. And that seems to be, you know, and each of the players tend to have in that game, each of the players tend to have their own allegiances and their own agendas and motivations as to what they're doing independent of all the other players. So I have to manage multiple antagonists and multiple routes of how things are going to go or potentially go. sorry if that's a long-winded way of just saying what connects the players to the story or the antagonist is they themselves deciding whether they want to pursue a quest or not.
Well, this leads to like the whole thing. Like, if they don't, then does the story have an antagonist? If your players are not going to go and chase after the one that you made the antagonist because they have no real iota of a reason or like personal reason to go do this besides, well, they're there, then what do you do? We go into like how you implement, the goals of your antagonist into campaign in relation to the player characters in your campaign.
Well, I think I kind of answered this before. I can't remember which podcast we were talking on, but I generally like to have my player characters either, themselves or NPCs that they have a very close relation to somehow interjected with the plot. Like, for example, somebody's missing dad could be a prisoner of this this bad organization, or this person could be an informant for them, or that sort of thing. I generally like to create intrigue within the player's backstory that I can weave into my overarching plot. And it could be things that either hinder or help the antagonist, depending on how the party decides to proceed and so on.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. For me, I make antagonists on a need to basis. And not everyone's that creative. Not everyone can crap out an antagonist out of their ass. But for me, it's like I like to have that flexibility, because sometimes a player will create an antagonist and either they know what they're doing or they don't know what they're doing, and they might be like, oh crap, I didn't mean to do that. But then they're like, you know what? I'm glad I did, because now we have a cool villain. Now we have a cool guy to fight or to argue with or clash with. How about you, Benefactor?
So generally, again, this goes spread. I would like to say I tend to make either a small to large group or organization. How I usually go about implementing set goals for the antagonist is it's always something dealing with one of the players in the game itself. So each of them would have someone that, no matter how someone has some kind of relation to them, or they have some kind of relation to one of the various antagonists. I'll get into it later. I do want us to tell stories about our players interacting with the antagonist. But generally, how I implement them is the player's goal is to do this. I would create someone who generally stand opposed to the player for various reasons. And usually they'll either be aligned or teaming with, say, I do make a villain. They'll be working with the villain for their own goals and reasons, which also, is them going against the protagonist they realize is dealing with this set villain. So I throw the antagonist there as a roadblock. There's also times I throw antagonists there just as very minor antagonists who are there to just create positive growth, which is in line with the player character's goal. Maybe they want a change in their character. Maybe they want various circumstances to be different. So there's a lot of ways I go about implementing it. I know my thing's a little bit irrational. But that's why I always ask, to know about your character in the background a bit, so that I know what your goals. And so I always ask players, because I make campaigns more on the sense of adventure of what their goals are, so I can understand like how I want to write something or someone that will stand in that way, or be something like a foil or mirror that can show them, if they go down the very wrong path, this could be what they end up as, and create a change for them if they see that this is not the way they want to go. Sorry.
Okay. That sounds pretty good.
Really, I thought that I was rambly a bit, like incoherent rambly.
Oh, you're basically saying that you tally it based on, well, one, you do one of the things that Evangelion was saying. right? Like you talk to your players and you infer what they're trying to get out of the story. You infer what they're looking for in the story. And then you try your best in your mind and your concepts to manifest their thoughts and their ideas. And then you try to put the pen to paper and you create what it is that they're trying to make.
Yeah, that comes down to just talking to your players, which I know we've kind of talked about a lot, but it's super important communication between players and DM as well as players between themselves for creating a game that everyone's going to enjoy and everyone's going to, you know, for example, the player is going to feel like the DM has heard their thoughts and has understood what type of character they're trying to make, for example.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. That's definitely a lot better than what I thought. I put it out there. But you know, I mean, and my thing too with that with antagonists is just trying to get a real good portrayal or depiction of them, you know, to convey what these guys are to the player characters. You know, one good example is we'll go with my name here for sake, the Benefactor. How I generally how I wish to portray, depict him so they understand that he is a very large force that is, you know, going to either be in their way or something that they may want to deal with. You know, is I have him not do something what we'll quote unquote evil. I wanted them to realize that this person's nature is off. He's very open. He's something human pretending to be human, right? He's something that's not human pretending. Yeah, not human pretending to be human.
Oh, he's
you caught me as
yes.
You caught me as I was going to correct myself.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I had to my brain was like, wait, what?
Where he gives off this very fun, pleasant, friendly vibe. But at the same moment, he's like breaking your arms and bones, or he's calling upon some horrific creature to attack you.
He's cute.
And I think one of the best examples is a player captain named Clank, who was arguing with him, saying like, "How dare you do this to people? You know, you drink their blood, you torture them," and he was just like, "I didn't do that. These guys did that in their own violation. You know, that had nothing to do with me." You know, in a whole curt manner, which everyone was just like, BS. You're totally on some BS. But it conveyed that, you know, this guy is not really looking at anything. You know what I'm saying? He's just going about and, you know, just like, I'm just some nice guy here trying to give people what they want. If they want this, then that's what they wanted. Why am I to get blamed for it? You know, as well as to see a little bit of the more dastardly side when you thwart something of his, which you guys got to see when you guys got time kind of rewound after you guys had died, and he was trying to figure out what happened. Why did this just happen? And you saw him have a little bit of an annoyed persona show up.
Wasn't there one time specifically where he was actually angry? It was something either somebody said or did. Was that the time?
That was the same event, but you might also remember another event that happened, but you were there. You might have heard it because it was talked about. So I don't know which event you're talking. It was two separate events.
I know for sure I was there, but it was one where like, and you had specifically said that, like, you know how you describe him as being kind of like this very aloof persona, but you said that like his just overall demeanor just changed and he just became like this incredibly intimidating, just, you know, it was almost like the mask was slipping.
It was most likely the same event where after you guys wiped the Bloodlord fight, where you guys had time around, that was one moment where you actually saw him slightly upset because it's just like, who rewound time like that? But there was, like I said, there was another one, but like I said, I don't know because you were there, but your character wasn't there. So that's why I'm not sure which one you're exactly talking about. So we'll go with the first one.
Yeah, but either way, I still thought that was a very interesting way to just show that other side to this character. And I mean, as a character, that would have been terrifying to witness for sure.
What about you guys? How you usually portray depict your antagonist in their nature to your player character? How you show them off and get us to know your player character to know, okay, this guy, he's the guy.
Well, see, I know you and I kind of discussed this, Benefactor, and what it really comes down to, as far as depicting uh, the the behaviors. I can't remember who exactly said it, but they talked about the three different main archetypes for antagonists and how they generally go about their business. One is the overt antagonist, which is one that players know about usually right away. Um, Darth Vader might be an example of this. The covert antagonist, which is one who kind of operates more low key and operates perhaps using minions and that sort of thing.
That's the Jason Wynn from Spawn.
Yes, or even the benefactor, as you described. I mean, the player characters knew who the benefactor was, but most people didn't. And most people, he was a very covert antagonist. But actually, I would say to the players, he was more overt because they kind of knew what he was doing, but covert in the sense that we didn't know exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. So okay, he was probably not the best example of that, but the third type I would say is the betrayal antagonist, which is pretty hard one to pull off, but it's basically somebody that might hang around the party, someone who might use the party to get something they need and then betray them afterwards.
Like Judas.
Like Judas, yes.
Yeah, it's the enemy within, and he could act perfectly fine and normal. There's different ways you could portray that. He could be perfectly fine and normal. He's with the party. He's 100% with the party, but then something happens.
Yeah.
And everyone recognizes the protagonist for his deeds, and they're very happy about his deeds and happy that he did his thing. And he's like, well, what about me? Like, I was with him the entire time, and no one's going to recognize me. Like, this is bullshit.
That could totally arise too, and that's a really great way to make an antagonist. But I guess that I wanted to use that to kind of start my point in saying is that when you're the DM, you get to decide which kind of antagonist you want this person to be, and they obviously operate very differently. The covert one, like I said, they're going to operate using minions. They may have a lot of resources, for example. They may do a lot of maneuvering behind the scenes to try and protect their identity. So that's part of it, and another part is identifying, like we said earlier, what are those evil traits. Like I said as well. Sorry, I'm getting kind of rambly.
Okay.
Is for example, if the theme of the campaign is ambition, just going back to that, you're going to want to show what sort of things this this evildoer, this antagonist ambitions, what they are and how they affect the world as well. So
yeah,
I'm blanking on examples for that right now, and I'm so sorry. But I believe that
the antagonist can impact the world.
yes.
So because he can impact the world, that gives the players an incentive to do something about it. Because if they don't, then they run the risk of this guy who can impact the world. They run the risk of Vegeta just annihilating the world because he's on a quest. He's on a mission. Hell be damned. Everyone else doesn't matter. So you have to do something to stop this guy. Otherwise, eventually he will be a problem for you. You want to go to shop? Oh, well, the antagonist annihilated the shop. Oh, you want to buy something, or you want to go and help your grandma? Well, the antagonist decided to raise taxes, whatever it is that the antagonist is doing. So it's going to encourage the players to get involved and stop this antagonist before they get out of hand, or if they're already out of hand, stop them before they achieve whatever the end game is that makes them whatever the stakes are. Now,
yeah. Oh, sorry.
I was going to say that might springboard onto another topic. Benefactor has caught me with this a few times. What if the stakes and consequences aren't a big deal?
Oh. Well,
Anyone have something for that?
I mean, if the stakes aren't a big deal, I mean, the players ignoring them isn't really that big of a deal. However, that's where I like to use countdown clocks, which I haven't really talked about, but it's basically the idea of you set up events that can happen. Either they're triggered by something that goes on in the world, like, you know, they discover a certain artifact or something, or I can decide as the DM, okay, this thing from their backstory, I'm going to choose to put it in here now.
Well, I was just thinking of a great example of what I'm trying to articulate here. All right, Lord of the Rings. I think everyone here knows Lord of the Rings. All right, the very simple premise. All right, keep the ring away from Sauron, take the ring to Mordor, destroy the ring, right? But what if, okay, Sauron gets the ring and Sauron just stops messing with people? What's the incentive for anyone to keep the ring from Sauron? And the answer to that is very simple. It's, well, he's evil and he'll destroy everyone. Like, his objective is conquest. So the incentive is to keep him away from the thing that will make him more powerful so that his conquest is nigh unstoppable, right? So it's like, if you're going with the route of like, oh, he's going to stop my grandma from getting groceries at the local mart, it's like, okay, then what if I were to just do that for my grandma and just completely circumvent the entire antagonist arc?
Well, this is why I say that it should be something you should make it something your players care about. It should be something that has a personal thing to your players, because no matter how quote unquote small it is, for them it's something important to them that they'll go about and deal with. But if it's something insignificant because it has nothing to really do with them, you'll find that players don't really care. Not every player is, and you said before, is really attached to a story. Sometimes they're much more attached to what they personally want to have going on with them and their character. It's like, okay, this guy is going to take over this kingdom and become a king. Who cares? What makes him so different from the guy that is already the king here? You know what I mean? It has nothing to do with me. It's not my king. It's not where I live at. You know what I'm saying? You have to then turn that into something a lot more personal. You now have to make it where just like, well, if he becomes king here, he now declared that he's going to start war with your kingdom, causing you guys to go to war and having your people to die, from the king that you live in. You have to set something that makes the players care. If you don't, then, that's, okay, whatever. And like I said, with your example was Sauron, Lord of the Rings, that's what it is. He took the ring, wasn't going to do anything. Why would anyone care? It's nothing real personal to them or the world. Like, okay, the guy got his ring back. Good for him. Oh, he just solidified his power. You have to make it where it's like, no, it has a personal reason for them, because they know that if he gets it, he's going to cause an all-out war with all of them. You know what I'm saying? Now, again, this is a little bit different. This is if you're going like a full flat-on like story. Yeah, you definitely have to make it personal, no matter how small, to the player characters when they really get into it. But if the thing's already set around them personally, no matter how small it is, they're going to kind of take in that interest because it's dealing legitimately with them. So it's pretty much an antagonist or an antagonistic event that they can't necessarily ignore.
Yeah.
Example of this, actually, which is probably one you're thinking about, was with Nicholas, with that whole manor situation, where I was just gonna like,
yeah,
what does that do with me? What do I care if this dude died? Okay, people die every day, big deal. But you had to then be like, books. You have to make the devil speak to me, the devil that was there speak to me, and then try to make me all where I'm like, I'm good, but there's a library in there with books and stuff. Okay, that's something important to me that'll make me go in there. Whatever the antagonist is doing, I don't really care. Whatever this devil is planning or doing here has nothing to do with me. But the books in there, yeah. My teammates, well, quote unquote teammates, they want to do that. That's sure. That's fine. Okay. Oh, the devil is now actually going to start like messing with me. Okay, now we're going to have an issue. You ignore me, I ignore you. You bring me into this with locking me inside this manor. Now we have a problem.
Yeah, that's where your character goes in the mentality of, I'm not going to start something, but I'm going to finish it.
Yeah.
But that also, depends on that character, right? And that's where you should know your players or understand your players if that's their personality, because Clank, you just talked about Clank earlier. He's the type of personality where he tries to, he follows the Hippocratic oath of be as least intrusive as possible, do the least amount of damage possible.
I miss Clank. I miss that
Me
player.
too. He's such like a good team player too.
You got to actually play it in like a full-on game with him though. Always get like moments with him, like fleeting moments. You got to play a whole game with him.
I have played a whole game with him.
Exactly, but I haven't. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Oh.
I only have fleeting moments. You got to play a whole game with him.
Well, you should have joined the last Cypher game. What am I gonna say?
Nah, y'all couldn't handle all this blackness, but yeah, so that's something for you DMs as well as players out there to take in consideration, that kind of stuff. Which goes into actually, which is really just a thing, which you kind of did go over just now, Crusader Jackaran, but how do you have your antagonists, prove to be an obstacle for your players, and for them to either get through or overcome in the long term. So short and long term. Let me phrase it better that way.
How to get them to overcome the antagonist?
Well, no. How did your antagonist prove to be an obstacle for them, like for them to either overcome in the short or long term?
Well, usually my antagonist, they get right in your face. Usually, if it's I should differentiate. If it's a short-term, immediate antagonist, usually they get right in your face. Now, they might not immediately do it. Like you get into a bar fight, right? They might not immediately jump in and start the fight. They might wait for you to leave. Once you leave, then they're going to pounce. They'll wait till your back is turned. They'll wait for an opportunity. Alternatively, if it's, Terrorfoul, he is going to look for the opportune moment of weakness, and he's going to let you know what his plan is. He's very much, hey, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. And because you're so determined and arrogant, that is what's going to be your downfall. And he is so confident in his ability that it's the player is their arrogance does get the better of them. They do get this idea of, oh, I'm going to prove him wrong. And they play his game.
I feel the personal attack here. You can just say what you're talking about. I'm right here, you can see it in my face.
I'm just saying, like that's his method, right? And he's the chess player. He's the mastermind villain. All right. He's not in your face. He's not I told you guys when you guys were first up against him in lore, okay, every single god turned their nose up at him as he is such a weakling. He's a nobody. No god gave him the time of day to consider him any sort of threat. He's not even a cosmic threat. Their mind of him is just, he's nothing. All right. And because of all of the other gods being arrogant, all of them completely dismissing him, no respect at all to him, he was able to overthrow all of them and become top dog because he's the chess player. He doesn't take you head on. He takes you on through the sides. He undercuts you. He has someone else fight you. He has other people play his game.
I like to say one correction. He was in my face. He wasn't in their face. He was in my face.
Well, and then I take another character like I would look at a character like I'm drawing a blank on what his name is. I think it's War Score from my Vertigo Cypher game. War Score is the type of character who he handles his problems head on. So if there's a problem, he goes directly at it. And to his detriment, to his naivete, he thought, okay, I can't take this problem head on. So I'll sneak in, I'll get close, and when their guard is down, I'll deliver a sucker punch. And when he did that, he got himself captured, only to repeat the whole circumstance again. That he got mutated into a superhuman, then he got converted back into a regular human, only to get remutated back into a superhuman because they knew he could survive the experiment. So like, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's different degrees of antagonists, and you didn't get your character Dimitri didn't get to meet his antagonist, but I had a feeling with that character that his antagonist, they would have had an interesting bromance. It would have been very much like Vegeta and Goku. It would have been like, I respect you, but I'm going to be the one to kill you.
All right. Well, I wish I could have seen that day. Which is quite a shame, honestly, when your players are, for one reason or another, unable to see their personal antagonists, or in general, antagonists. It really is, I can say, very painful thing. To where you have antagonists ready and they haven't really got a chance to fully meet them.
Here's a great thing about that, right? About Demetrius, okay? For him, I had his antagonist, your created antagonist. You created a character, and I had to make that guy an antagonist for you, okay? You hadn't gotten to him yet, but I had already prepared other antagonists for your character to deal with that were on his level. So, I give the players the option, like Vegeta, okay, they can convert their antagonists depending if the players are willing to. They might see a Vegeta or a Piccolo in their enemy's arsenal and say, hey, this guy is good. I want him on my side. Like Little John, like Robin Hood and Little John. It's like the typical meeting for these two is that they're adversaries. And through triumph, one way or the other, they decide, hey, why don't we team up together?
All right. So, Lady Potato here. Tell me, you really haven't done a full tabletop RPG D&D game, but what kind of ideas would you have for an antagonist that you make? That what would they do to make themselves an obstacle? How would you go about it? Again, this is theoretical. Just base this imaginary scenario in your brain about how you would have the antagonist be an obstacle to, say, me and Crusader Jackaran here. Just knowing how we are and the characters we make.
Well, I know that like you would be harder, but I think I know because you are generally the type of player that enjoys to make characters that are going to pursue their own goals. So, for example, for you, whatever that goal is, obviously the antagonist, whether it's the main antagonist or your personal antagonist, could either be a rival to that goal or somebody who doesn't want your goal to happen at all. That's what I would do for you personally. For Crusader is more of he enjoys to he likes to make his characters fun to play, but correct me if I'm wrong here, but you are generally someone who enjoys going along with the DM's sort of plot, correct?
Rather than that's pretty fair. I try to play with whatever the DM wants to do. I try to roll with that.
So yeah, for you it might be harder. Like I would need to know what type of character you're playing. For example, I'll use Hal as an example. Hal's goal is to die. So what I would do for Hal as far as antagonists, I might have somebody who, is going to challenge him, for example. Like I might create deadly encounters specifically for Hal, one-on-one encounters, that sort of thing. That might be one way to challenge his goal.
Yep.
I think something that would really be a slap to the face is if somebody won, if Hal lost but didn't kill Hal. That would be something I would do.
That would piss him off.
Yes.
That would be an antagonizing thing to do to him. Yes.
That's probably what I would do.
Yeah, I was going to recommend that. I was like, that's something you can do. Now, with Hal, he's also pretty easy. He's a great example of a character that his antagonist is anyone worthy of fighting. All right.
So what I think what I would probably do is it would be somebody who would fight him honorably, but then decide, you know what, you're not really good enough to fight me yet, so I'm gonna let you live until you get stronger.
Yeah.
Which could give him another motivation to keep living and fighting on, because like this guy pissed him off. He insulted your honor, so you need to get revenge and defeat him. Or let him fight, or fight him properly and let him kill you, or whatever it is.
Yeah. That's a possibility, yeah.
Okay. That's quite interesting. I'm glad. I'm still waiting for that day when you run a campaign now, Lady Potato. Waiting for that day.
That day will come hopefully sooner rather than later. I don't want to tease too much yet, but work in progress. Work in progress. Gotta collect my players and work in progress. See what I come up with based on that. I kind of going off topic here. I do like to get an insight as to what type of characters I'm dealing with prior to solidifying my campaign, just so that I know what kind of antagonists would work for them. And sort of plan. I don't know if do you guys generally take that approach, or do you just start running the game and then kind of put it in as you go along?
Well, I had already answered that earlier. I generally need to know what the players have, their wants and desires, so then I can make antagonists that, if I do have an overarching plot for the campaign, has some kind of, trifecta relationship. They're doing something, depending on the size of the antagonist. I usually give different tiers level of antagonists for my players in various different ways, shapes, or forms. So let's say like the Benefactor is the villain / antagonist for the players once they find out what he's doing and everything. If they care enough to deal with him, he's overarching hanging there. If they don't want to deal with him, they usually have their very much lower level antagonists, ones that are definitely on a much closer personal level to them. And I usually have other, like we say, like a mid-tier one that is in some relation related to you and is in connection with, like the villain of the plot, the Benefactor, moving forward. So I generally give multiple different antagonists that you are going to meet along the way in the journey, based on either, again, are they part of your plot and what reason they are, or if it's just something small for you, which goes, I guess, into me wanting to tell a bit of a story here on that, on a low level antagonist. This one specifically was for Lady Potato, which ended up becoming another person's low-level antagonist in the end. Both of them ended up becoming, D became both of their antagonists. So they had went to a town called Esol, and Lady Potato whole backstory was that her father was a very famous adventurer called the Mirror Man. He had an adventuring party and everything, and then he went missing and died. So for her thing was she's gonna find out, the stuff behind her father and the thing that killed him and whatnot, and learn this mysterious thing she read that he was involved in. Along the way, she went back to her old criminal organization that she used to be a part of when she was a rebellious teenager, that she left because her baby daddy had beaten and abused her, and she thought it was her own gang members that in general were aligned with that. So this person was her low-level antagonist, which she's supposed to meet when she returned to Esol, who was supposed to show for her that, no, he's the only bad guy in the scenario. What you thought was the entirety of the Crimson Vipers that were the ones beating against you was, in fact, wrong. It was him acting out on his own. And, he was supposed to be there for you to get both that sense of closure with him, in that you're no longer afraid of him, in that these people are still here and supporting behind you. That was supposed to be kind of your thing with him as a low level antagonist, somebody that you're going to meet, you're going to have a growth from him, he's going to create a growth in you that either is positive, where again I always go for the positive and the hopeful, which change you and show you the thing you misunderstood. But it could have went negatively. Again, to me, that's fully left on the player character. I always want to go for a positive result, but it's always left on the player character if it can end up negatively. But that was my, hopefully you can say, intent for what was happening there. That is what I consider my low-level antagonist. He's someone that shows up very briefly in your way, while you're here, and it has caused you undue, harm mentally and physically to you. And, you're supposed to get over him. You're supposed to become stronger than him. You're supposed to show that, he can't do this to you anymore. He's supposed to be someone that once he shows up, he's gone. He's done. He's out. He's no longer there. For me, that was your low-level antagonist. Now, I had one that was much more higher on the scale, who you met. And this is what I loved about him, was that he was kind of an antagonist and a friend at the same time, which was supposed to be Dr. Aurelius Clover, because he knows about your father, but he doesn't outright share that information. He's supposed to, over the course of the game, tease you into seeing what your father has been doing and leading you breadcrumbs to where you should go to find out more what was going to be going on with the Benefactor. That was his section of Benefactor, and with the whole cult thing on what they were doing. But he was somebody who he was an obstacle in you believing your father to be a good man. You know what I mean? He was the one that, like, you're going trying to figure out things of your father and how he kind of goes about and tells you and shows you these twisted things. It was supposed to be that obstacle of how would that change you? That I didn't know how. That one was completely like, it could be positive, neutral, or negative completely. That one I didn't even have intended goal. That one I wasn't sure how it was going to turn out at all. I didn't have a real thought. And that's what I did like about him as an antagonist for you there. So he's like a mid-level. He's one that he has a very closer importance to you in your overall goal, which is find out your father. But he's not necessarily, as we go, with a villain to you. He's someone that is friendly, but is clearly distorting your view and playing with your view of what your father is. And then again, we go into the higher tier, which is the Benefactor, which you find out, he's the one that talked to your father, and your father worked with him to do all of these things, and that is you finding out, for your journey, what your father did, why did he work with the Benefactor, why the Benefactor, sorry, my words are a little jumbly here, and stuff like that. So that's my 3 tiers for antagonists that I usually have for my players. Now, again, there's others in there. I have stuff for Crusader, which was supposed to start with his uncle and lead the way, but there was a miscommunication and a misread by me on his backstory, which I thought his father was dead. Excuse me. So that kind of made a very break between the players, which ended up making things not work out. And again, that's apologies on me. I misread the backstory. And came
I remember that. I was like, wait, what? that was a little awkward.
Yeah.
I told you, I was like, I'll roll with it, but it's like, it's not what I was expecting.
But
it was more. Here's what I'll give that credit. It was more than what I was expecting, though. Okay, I was not like, I didn't know what your story writing capability was. I didn't know what your style was. Okay, I was thinking you have your story, your campaign, and you're going to run us through it, and maybe you'll take some elements from our past and weave it in there somewhere. I didn't know that you'd have it like, here's an entire quest line. Had I known that, I would have probably stuck it out longer.
Yeah,
with Gustav, I probably would.
Yeah, no, you guys had some again. This I blame a little myself because how I break down, and this is something I explained to you guys before. This is probably something that would been good for another video, but another session. But I like to break everyone into arcs, so not like, so one part may be very focused on 1 or 2 people, and the others are more like the side characters for this one. And then when you go somewhere else, the tables turn where you may now be the main focus, main character here, and the others are your side character and assistants, which doesn't always work for some people. So some people are just kind of like confused why they're getting so much focus.
Yeah, I like that system. I like that. That's good.
Yeah, that's my thought on it and how I like to go about it. But I always do try to have something for players to have as those side characters in between things and some kind of correlation and connection. And say how I did it was you all was supposed to actually have, no matter how small, a connecting thread that had all you connected to each other. So you and Drake was supposed to have a connection to each other. You and Gillian was supposed to have a connection to each other. Gillian and Mara, which is a potato, they saw their connection to each other. You know what I'm saying? There's supposed to be a weird little connection of dots. And this is where your antagonists come in, as well as the Benefactor as the main quote villain, comes into play. And as you guys play, you learn more and more of things about yourself, your history, and what's going on, while the cult is more of, it's something you'll deal with when you run into it. But your focus is for you was, promotional military, which you were supposed to figure out things on the military end. You're gonna have an antagonist, Amara kind of gotten a late potato, because she had made a new character with Rebecca. And the antagonist for you originally was supposed to be the nobles, which is hilarious. You already hated the nobles, which worked because your antagonist was going to be the nobles that are against people like you coming up in the world, which is why your father was killed, which again was had to be rewritten to injured. But, and that was supposed to be antagonist for you, was supposed to be your own countryman, in a sense.
Yeah.
So I always try to write antagonists in different levels, and they pose different obstacles for you, but it's always a reason or connection. And then sometimes I may even make your own players your antagonists based on your thing, which is supposed to be between Plasma Gigas and Zen. They were supposed to be in a sense they had a connection, which would possibly make them antagonists to each other because of their whole family dynamic history and line, which one of the player characters dies, so that didn't get to happen. That big reveal didn't get to happen. But and that's something I think DMs should also not be too ashamed to do, is set up a situation where maybe you have two players in the party that end up being antagonists to each other. Not disrupting that, but they had this little antagonistic energy, like you said, Goku and Vegeta with each other. Oh, that was it. Sorry, I also got interrupted by somebody messaging me.
No, that's fine. I was gonna say, interweaving and creating webs within webs and nets, that's good. That's fine. I think that's a good thing to do, where you have your players bouncing off each other, and that's something that we had this problem with the Thursday night game that we both left. It was whenever the players would have an opportunity to talk and get to know each other, the DM would interject and interrupt it. And for me, I've learned that it's no, stay out of it. Let the players talk. Okay. You step in when the players want you to step in. Okay. Or if they're going to do something that logically wouldn't really make sense.
That goes to the whole other thing too. Yeah, with DMs kind of not giving the players a chance to really all get in their dialogue, say the piece, and keep the interaction within the players, where it's not necessary for the DM to say anything. There's no reason for them to talk. You know what I mean? And that's why when Late Potato and Plasma Gigas came together against this antagonist, I let them have that moment after the antagonist defeat the ex-boyfriend. I didn't say anything. I made no other character interject or say anything. I let them have that very good moment there for them to come to understanding together that, they have this kind of relationship and connection through this organization here. And that for Late Potato, Plasma Gigas was a big help in dealing and getting over a bit of her trauma with her ex-boyfriend / baby daddy.
Yeah, I actually wanted to kind of tell the story because you teased it. You said about how, you didn't exactly go into the details about how Plasma Gigas got involved with what was supposed to be my antagonist. I know we actually recently talked about this. So I think it was mainly just a coincidence. Plasma Gigas was, what was he? He was buying armor or something? or he was at a tavern, or how did it go down exactly, Benefactor?
So how it went down was, and this was the event that I had primarily for Plasma Gigas and Crusader here, and one other player who will not be named right now, which was dealing with the stampede that was happening. They were supposed to be outside the town, and they each had a little miniature mission that they were supposed to do, prepare for the event. And again, this is where I go to where you guys, some people are like main, some people are side. This is one where they were out there and they couldn't really come back in. They were supposed to get assistance from you guys who were inside to help them get particular materials and things. So for him, it was the missing healing potions thing, which because he doesn't really contact anyone for assistance, he took it upon himself to leave his area of preparation for the stampede to go and do that. Right? Which led him to the Crimson Vipers headquarters, and that's where the revelation happened. It was supposed to be at the Stampede. My original intention was to happen at the Stampede when you guys are now chilling in the place, but because he went there early, he ended up running into what is essentially his uncle, one of the two, or formerly two best friends of his father, and someone that he had grown up with. Now the reason he altercated with your ex-boyfriend was because, typical thug guy, like, who are you? You bumped into me, apologize, the little stereotypical thing. And Platinum Gigas knocked him out in one hit. Like, legitimately, he decked him. He rolled really well and decked him in one hit.
So naturally, that got him very upset. And another time, what was it when we immediately came in and walked in together, or when there was like I remember he got beat up by him seemingly 3 times. I remember the last one, but there was a one in between where Plasma Gigas didn't even hit him, but he was just so exhausted that he passed out. But because of how it happened, it looked like he got beat by Plasma Gigas.
See, I thought you wanted to tell the story. You got me telling all the story.
Well, hey, I remember the last detail, but it's been a long time, and
all I remember from this, now that you're saying it, I remember you guys giggling like schoolgirls over the fact that he had decked some random guy unconscious, and then this same random guy got all up in his face because he was like all upset because he walked in with you, and it was like just out of nowhere. It was random, and we were like, "What's that about?" And you were like, "Don't worry about it." And it's like, okay, but that's a little weird, right? Like, dude walking up to us, fronting, and then he backed away because he's a little bitch. That's what I remember. That's what I remember of that whole thing.
That was pretty decent detail. No, that was pretty decent. So the cover of the missing contact, starting with what Lady Potato said. The second encounter with him was him coming back after the encounter with you, and then him getting punished. Which is why I thought you would tell the story from your perspective. I was going to fill in the gaps originally there that your character wasn't involved in, but the other one was. Because you kind of happened after the knockout, you then happened. And then it goes back to that guy in Plasma Gigas, which he tried to stab Plasma Gigas because he was so weakened from the beat up. He barely got the knife into his back, and he passed out from just sheer loss of like blood and energy. And then the third one that you both are mentioning is around the end of the event. Everything is calmed down a bit. Plasma Gigas and Late Potato came together into the place, and he didn't like that. For him, it was just like, that's my woman. Who you think you are, coming my woman? And as he was going to go and take Late Potato, Plasma Gigas, being the Giga Chad man for ones that he is, stepped in between and was like, don't you even dare. Where the guy kind of just like remembers everything that happened to him, just kind of like squeamishly with his tail between his legs, just walked out.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, because like something that I will note is that I had actually done my whole spiel to a couple of my party members where I confided my my dark sad backstory about having an abusive man like in the city. It was actually recently, in the first 2 times that Plasma Gigas encountered this ex-boyfriend, he didn't know that this was the guy that my character was talking about. It wasn't until the 3rd time that he actually realized that this was the ex-boyfriend. So that's what was so amusing about the first couple times, especially. And then the 3rd time just really like set it off. So it was a pretty enjoyable experience from my end as a player to have that whole thing kind of pan out the way it did. And it was honestly one of my favorite memories from that campaign, from that character's perspective, for sure.
Well, of course, because it's something very directly dealing with you. A lot of people in the campaign, when they come, players from the campaign that talk about campaign, come and say their favorite parts, it's usually something very much dealing with something personal to them. In some kind of either revelation or event that happened is very much personal to them. Has nothing to really do with, you want to say, quote, the overarching plot of it. Which I'm glad for. That means that I was able to satisfy you in some way with what your character wants and your character desires and goals. Because you brought up another event with before with me that you had really liked, but this was your second character, Rebecca, and that was the party scene.
Yes.
And again, that's something that was dealing very closely with your character, and players love that. Players definitely always remember things that are very personal to them and that happen to them. You know what I'm saying? If it's something like the whole group is dealing with, they may remember it. It's something funny happens, but that's never always their favorite moment. Your favorite moment is usually something very, very close and important that happens to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Which just should emphasize the importance of having these personal antagonists for individuals in your party to face, not just your whole party. Not to say that the whole party can't be involved in the resolution somehow, but if it's that person's particular antagonist, that's going to be more impactful to that player.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, my antagonist for your game there, not many people knew who they were when they saw them. To me, it was very obvious, but it's me. Like I'm somewhat of an intellect, and so everyone doubted me when I said the crabmen are the real threat to the society. No one wanted to listen to me. And so when the crabs take over, these crabs with 60 feet of vision, fully comprehending a guy shooting a gun at them. Okay. I'm just saying, it was obvious to me they were the villains.
You brought those crabs into existence. I'm just going to say that. You guys had a crab lead you through a dungeon. It was great.
It was malarkey.
That was a pretty funny experience. And then, of course, now crabs are universally the enemy in every campaign ever now. Like, they're the ones who are running behind the scenes. It's the crab people.
But I'm curious. Well, Lady Potatoes, since we're still technically on this, I would like to know, more on your view as the person who that person was. You were the protagonist in that. Your view of him as your antagonist. And your whole thing with him. How was that for you as a player come about? How was that experience for you as a player? Who I am off today.
Well, like I said before, it was a very satisfying overall experience because my character had a history of where, she, was in young love with this guy and he was very abusive, and she had a dynamic where she left him because she wanted to protect their child, which he still didn't know about at that point. And I was wondering if you were ever going to bring that up, or if once this solution resolved down the line, he might figure it out somehow. But anyways, and she, like you said, she didn't know that the Crimson Vipers had nothing really to do with that. She kind of at the time, he made it out to seem that what he was doing was sort of on behalf of the Crimson Vipers, punishing her for wanting to leave because she kind of wanted a better life for herself and wanted to get herself out and away from the situation due to her child that she was going to be having. But seeing and after she found out that the Crimson Vipers weren't involved in that and how they handled the situation, in essence, punishing him for treating her the way that they did, that was a very satisfying thing as a player to see. And then how it worked out with Plasma Gigas's character Gilliam stepping in. I mean, that was a really big moment for bonding within the party, because it kind of helped her get over her trauma of trusting other people, that she can rely on her friends to have her back. So from that experience, that was a really cool way to deal with it, even though she technically didn't lift a finger in that scenario.
Okay. That's great. I wanted to hear some about this from your player perspective as a player and running into one of your antagonists. And then this goes to Crusader here. What about in your own games itself? Do you have any stories you want to share about your players' interactions with their antagonists or an antagonist? Either which way or.
I have a lot of stories of how players interacted with my antagonists. I'm trying to think of a good one to tell right now. Probably a. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's a lot of them. I'm trying to think of like which one would be a good one to talk about.
Okay, fine. Let me help you here. This is a little biased, but how about me in Terrafile?
All right. Yeah, that's an antagonist relationship where your character has this goal to save as many elves as possible, and you're confronted with the opportunity of stopping the guy who caused their near extinction. And you're not really interested in stopping him. It wasn't until he really smacked your honor in the face of you that you took it upon yourself to say, you know what, this is personal now. And in that campaign, it's a grim, dark, end of the world, post-apocalyptic world. So you have almost no one has any sort of honor, or honor is a very, very dying thing. So I mean, that's an unusual trait for a character to have. And not to give spoilers, but effectively Terrafile's agenda is to snuff out honor. Get rid of it. You don't need it. There's no value to honor. So if you have someone like Timaeus who's going to confront him, you're just feeding the lion the meat. At least that's from his perspective, how he looks at it. And I'm sure from Timaeus' perspective, good. I want this guy to underestimate me. He takes me as just a regular elf. He thinks I'm just some nobody. And so as long as he thinks that I'm some nobody, I'm going to be the one to vanquish him. I might not be the one who directly delivers the killing blow, but I'm going to be the architect of his tomb, so to speak.
Oh yeah, I definitely did plan on having some kind of adventure there, but
And Timaeus took that personally.
I would say like in that regard, right? For Timaeus, in his regard, he has taken to fostering other party members because he recognizes they all have their potential. They all have something to bring to the table. Even if some are more special than others. One being able to turn into a gun, another being able to turn into a plane, another being able to sprout angelic wings and fart sparkling rainbows, as you put it. From his perspective, it's like all of these guys have something they can bring to the table. And if he is able to harness that, he believes he has a chance to defeat this antagonist, this dark god.
All right. So this goes to a bit to Late Potato, who was in that same campaign. You know, who did you feel for you was your antagonist? Who was it something you supposed to overcome?
For me, it was obviously Voidimus, based on the fact that I had started out being his warlock. He was my patron, and then I went and decided, based on what I had witnessed through the course of the campaign, that I didn't want to work under him anymore. I didn't like what he stood for. I eventually, woke up and saw what he was doing was wrong, so I cut the connection. And that obvious. Pardon me?
Much to his upset.
Much to his upset, because from his perspective, he just lost a very valuable tool. One who had eyes literally on Dawn, who was, I guess, to put it bluntly, she was kind of like the Jesus of this world.
Well, I mean, that's fair, and I don't know if you figured it out, but he was spying for Terrafal.
Well, I did figure it out, but I mean, there was also some unknown things from her story. Like, she had some ambiguous details about her backstory that, from Sylvanas' perspective, she believed that he had information for her, which was why she thought she was using him the whole time. But once she figured out it was really the opposite way, she cut that cord and was like, you know what? I'm strong enough to do this on my own. I'm going to be independent. And then that's what she did. She, out of game, I actually went ahead and made some changes to my character sheet with the approval of my DM, of course. But that was kind of like a story reason to sort of adjust my class, which I had already at that point put in several levels into Sorcerer. But that time, based on things we had kind of worked out, I decided to put levels into Bard at that point as well, which that's a whole other topic. But yeah, that's kind of how that worked out for my character so far. I have yet to feel the vengeance of my former patron, but I have definitely cut the connection with him.
Yeah, well, that's something else Tomais and Sylvanas have in common. Turning friends/patrons into antagonists, because yeah, definitely did Dracoharu, I'm pretty sure, as Tomais too, that he's gonna try to come at me. He's not gonna just let me go that easily.
No, and I mean, who's the other guy? Not Voidimus, but somebody who else I had encountered. I'm blanking on his name.
There's too many of them. I think
there's so many gods, but it was the guy who appeared in the sewer area of the first raider encampment.
But there was also
the electric guy.
There was also the guy that was with Terrafal and Voidimus when we was in the past. But I think I saw them personally.
I saw them too, because I was at that ceremony thing. I was amongst the crowd, because Voidimus, well, I was this was right before I made the decision to cut the connection. He had basically taken me to this event. That was kind of like the inciting incident, actually, was just, he had taken me under his wing very personally, and then I saw all the horrible things he was doing.
Well, that's something I don't know if you kind of remember. That was some character growth, her severing her connection to Voidimus, because her origin story was that she was having attachment issues, because every time she was with a group of people, a settlement, they got raided and annihilated. So she didn't have any friends. She didn't have any family. She was constantly panicking and looking for shelter. And Voidimus offered to take her in as her shelter. And that's a part of when she finally severed the connection, she was like, I don't need you anymore to protect me. I can protect myself. And to him, he kind of found that comical. And then he realized that she was serious, and then she did it.
Left his ass on red and blocked.
Yeah. So, but to her, that was a difficult choice, because it's he's the one entity that has been in her corner, has protected her, and has been with her from start to finish. And then she's like, peace out, bye.
I found other people. I have a family now. You should have gave him that whole like cliche speech. I have a real family now. People that actually care about me. I don't need you anymore.
I haven't given him that speech yet, but I was planning on
about
doing that when he
family.
eventually did encounter me. I was going to be like, I don't need you anymore. I'm strong on my own, and I'm stronger with my friends.
My
You know,
friends
that
are
sort
my
of thing.
power.
Like I said, we need Vin Diesel to show up. It's family.
God dang it.
But that's great. Why, you know why that story's great. And again, this is what I was saying earlier during the story. Like that's something that DMs can also always do if it's something that happens naturally with the players. Is depending on the choice the players make. One that was once a friend can now become an antagonist. They now antagonize, in a sense, a character that is now going to go out their way to oppose them. Anything small. It's like, why does a god care that you severed a connection with them? It's like just for the painess of it, because their god just like, I don't like the fact that this mortal dare be the one to sever them. I choose when to sever the connection. Hold on, and then start being real petty to you and doing things that become obstacle in your path. So things like that. Again, it doesn't have to be a god, but things like that is also really good advice for DMs to also have with their players. That you can turn a once friend into antagonists if your players begin to antagonize them instead of just writing them out the story. I know some people tend to do that.
Well, I'm now you're mentioning that. I'm thinking of two antagonists on the Misty Step. I'm thinking of two antagonists that go completely unnoticed or underwhelmed. One being Quarky and the other being Scaver. And you guys should think about them as they are both antagonists. They're both definitely antagonists.
Here's the thing about both of those antagonists. What's his name? Scaver? I'm blanking on his name for some reason. Scaver. He is so unintelligent and he has his way of figuring out things randomly, but from most people's perspective, he's a very unintelligent creature. He doesn't speak well. So for most people, he wouldn't really be a threat. And to us, most of us could probably defeat him in single combat fairly easily. So from our perspective, he is very under the radar. He hasn't done anything overtly to catch our attention that is villainous either.
Yeah. I mean,
and he's someone we could deal with. And Quarky, he is kind of shady, but again, never done anything super villainous to the point where we would, hurt him. And so far, he's been more advantageous to us than disadvantageous to us thus far.
And before Crusader Jackaran spoils anything, the pack or back when they say with Quirky, me and Samias already understood, if he's giving us information, he's giving our information out to people. So I already understood that kind of trade there. So I already knew this is a give and take thing. That's what I believe I brought up to him as Samias Quirky. I know there's a give and take here. If I'm getting something from you, you're getting something from me. So I already knew that from him. It was just that I didn't care enough.
Well, right. And that I was going to say, that's actually something noteworthy with Tamias. Okay. Tamias and Quarky have a very nod, wink, wink relationship where it's, I know you do evil shit and I know you do lawful shit, but if I catch you doing it, you're in deep shit. So don't let me catch you. Wink, wink, nod, nod. That's their arrangement.
Yeah, pretty much. It's as long as I don't catch you in the act, then you're good. I can't just slap you, with some manacles and whatnot if I don't have any, proof or anything you did anything wrong. But I also understand. I do know that you're doing something wrong. But I use you, use me, and again, like you said, as long as I don't catch him screwing me over, it's just that I can do about it.
And I was going to say, there's another antagonist I'm thinking of that a lot of you guys did not like. You did not like him. Oh well, is he an antagonist? Salmonius. Did you guys take him as an antagonist? I should probably ask.
Who is Salmonius? Oh, was he like the archaeologist guy?
No. Wasn't he the seer guy, the evil? Well, the quote evil seer guy who's the evil deity is a seer.
No. Salmonius was the guy who wanted to turn the witches into slaves of a certain variety.
Yeah, he's an antagonist. Sylvanas did not take very kindly to that. In fact, she doesn't like him at all because there was something about him that she just doesn't like.
Oh,
I remember that.
Holy dude! Oh,
Sylvanas was mean to him. I remember this. She was actually mean to him because he said something very demeaning, and Sylvanas she's a bad bitch now. Sorry, I'm creating a lot of things for you to edit, but she is just not the type of woman that will take that kind of garbage.
No, that's right. I was gonna say because she did not like him at all.
No.
And what you're misunderstanding about him is that he's a capitalist. So he's looking for any opportunity to make money. And so every time he came up with a money scheme, him and Tharival would have gotten along perfect. Those two would have been two peas in a pod, right? They would. His whole thing is just how can you make money? And so he's coming up with all these different schemes. That's why, when you're jumping around, oh no, he was this. Oh wait, he was this seer guy. Yes, he's all of these things. He's one moment he's trying to sell you capes and robes, and the next moment he's trying to sell slaves. Next moment he could be trying to sell archaeological objects. You never know what this guy is going to try selling you.
Sylvanas is a master of the silver tongue, so she knows when other people are doing it too. So I would imagine she's the type of character that would see through that very easily. So, and the fact that he had said some very pervy remarks as well, and he was being, sincere, she did not take kindly. And the fact that he's let's enslave these girls as well, not just the witches, but the girls that were being controlled by these witches that Sylvanas wanted to try and save. He wanted to imprison those girls and use them. And Sylvanas was like, that is not happening. I will burn you to a crisp before I let that happen. And she was not happy.
So that's why I wanted to ask about him, because it's he's a great character. And I was curious how you guys saw him as an antagonist.
Yeah.
I can't wait till Sylvanas burns him alive.
I didn't. I didn't take much thought into him, honestly. And Sylvanas was captain, so I was whatever her decision is what we're gonna follow. But I didn't really put much. I barely remembered him until literally just then. I was oh, that guy. I was because he was not on my radar. No, my antagonist for that entire section was D3. So
I was gonna say your entire a player character was your entire antagonist for that entire half of the game.
So yeah, I did not even blink with that one. I really forgot about it until you mentioned. I was oh right, we did have a guy with us there doing something. What was he doing again? Oh yeah, no, I didn't care a single thing about him.
That just comes to show that sometimes your antagonists will strike the right chord with some characters, but it won't with others. But I don't know. I've said just about everything I could on this subject. Is there anything else you guys want to bring up?
Yeah, there's something I want to bring up. This is going back to you, Late Potato. Ooh. For that one campaign we did start in, who was supposed to be the overarching? It seemed like you had an overarching antagonist or villain for that party that you had in mind.
Are you talking about Fear in the Night?
Yeah.
I can't answer that question, unfortunately.
Oh, so you are going to redo Fear in the Night? Okay.
I told you that's what I was planning on revamping. I can't say for certain when it's actually going to be running yet, but I have started getting it reworked, so there'll be more to come on that. And I mean, I want to talk to you guys eventually more about that, but for now, that's all I have to say on that.
All right. Well, this has been fun. I'm pretty sure we could sit here all day with various stories and stuff. I got one for other players like Plasma Giga / Gilliam and his best friend Kilt turned antagonist who still kind of like loves him as a best friend and brother. I still have plenty of stories to tell about various antagonists I have for various players, even in one campaign on its own. But I think we should wrap it up here. I can always save that story for another time.
Well,
For nothing.
I was just thinking of one story. That might be a good story to end it on. Maybe I'll save Mr. Red, Lady Potato. I'll save Mr. Red's story for Rumble, a Rumble exclusive, because that story gets into some goes in some really dark territories. Not suitable for YouTube. So I won't say anything about that. But I'm thinking of Grimgrin. His origin story would be a great one. Which, let me ask you two both. Do you guys know of the villain story arc, as they call it, the villain origin? Like how a villain is made?
Yeah.
I know what you're referring to because I know Grimgrin's condition. I know how he started out and sort of sensing where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Right.
There's, if I remember correctly from reading, there's generally two. There's generally two. Usually, someone has a protagonist that has slipped down the slope, and then general origin story of like something terrible happens, and then that kind of thing.
Yeah. The gist of it is the hero's arc is usually the villain does something that causes the hero to react. They jump off the cliff and try to save the day or undo the thing. They take up their calling. Well, the villain arc is the hero is responding to a villain. So in this case, we had Johnny and we had this gangster dude. And Johnny was at this apartment with his friend Emma. Okay, Emma was like, "Oh, I got to go back to my house to get my apartment to get some things." So Johnny was like, "Okay, I'll accompany with you because if you're moving stuff, I'm a big guy, I can move stuff for you." So they both go back. When they go to her apartment, all right, she takes note that something is off. First, when she's approaching, there's two cars parked out front, and they're illegally parked. So she makes comment of it. "Oh, I can't wait to see those guys get towed. I hate when they park right here. That's very inconsiderate, blah, blah, blah." Doesn't really think too much on it. And Johnny is considering moving the cars for the people, but then he decides not to because it's kind of a jerk thing to do when you go out to get your car and you don't know where it's at. Like that'd make you panic. So he decides not to do that. All right. But when they go inside, Emma sees her neighbor acting really weird. And he has these strangers with him, these gangsters. And they end up asking, like, "Hey, is everything okay?" And the gangsters then begin bullying them. And they're like, "Oh, screw off. This is none of your business. Don't worry about it." And Johnny then says, "Well, hold up. This guy doesn't seem like he's very interested in hanging out with you guys." And so the gangsters then pull a gun on Johnny and they point it at him and they say, "You better mind your own business, pal." And Johnny is immune to bullets, but the gangsters don't know this. Johnny looks just like a regular person. They don't know that he's a superhero. So they aim their gun at him and they fire the first shot to kill him, and it doesn't do anything to him. So Johnny's like, "All right, well, you made a mistake." And he begins to immolate himself, like his body turns to fire. And so he puts up his fire aura and he goes to punch this dude and rolls a nat 1. So he's looking to just knock this gangster out. It's a regular human, nat 1. And he has no idea what's about to happen. He doesn't know that I've already set up one of these gangsters to be his antagonist. So the nat 1 gave me the opportunity I was looking for. and he thought it was just a pure miss, and his fist just went right over the guy and smashed right into the wall. And I said, no, that's not what happened. You hit the guy. And he was like, wait, I did? It's like, yeah, you hit him. And you hit him with a little too much power. The flame from your arm extended out to him and burned him, because his fist actually do fire damage. I'm like, it burns him, but it doesn't just burn him this time. He catches on fire. And Johnny's at first, as I'm describing this, Johnny's like, oh, well, that's not bad. Like, I can take out that fire, nothing. That's not no big deal. I'm like, but again, you hit him a little too hard, that he goes flying out the front door, just boom, out of the building. And he smashed into a tanker truck of chemicals. And the chemical truck, I was telling the players this, all right? I'm like, the chemical truck is ominously named Chemical X. So the truck gets punctured, and this chemical starts pooling over this guy, and it catches fire. It's flammable. He begins just burning to death. And so Johnny has like a heart attack as this young superhero is like, oh my God, I just killed this guy. But Johnny's also like, I have bigger issues. I have 3 more gunmen to deal with. So he's like torn between what do I do first. So he begins fighting these gunmen and people before he goes to respond to the guy who's on fire. Well, he manages to save the guy on fire, and he gets all sorts of deformed, and he needs medical treatment. They rush him to the hospital, and they find out afterwards, they find out that he absorbed Johnny's superpower, but he also became like an anti-Johnny. What happened was Johnny's power fused into the guy, and it gave him some of Johnny's memories while wiping out his own memories because of the trauma that he suffered. So he has all this knowledge and information about Johnny, but nothing about himself. So he has this like dissociative identity crisis going on, and he absolutely hated Johnny because he couldn't remember himself. And of course, Johnny remembered what happened, but this guy didn't. So he was like dead set on fighting Johnny. And he also, his powers got inverted. So Johnny was fire. This guy was cold. Johnny had light. This guy was darkness. So I created this very cliche antagonist, superhero antagonist, who they skirmished like 2 or 3 times before their final encounter. Right before they actually fought the final boss, they fought this guy in an encounter where it was basically a nuke was going to go off. A nuke was going to go off inside this place. A lot of people were going to die. And Grimgrin had told Johnny that, because Johnny had said, like, Johnny was fighting like 3 villains at one time, and he couldn't take on all of them. So because Johnny was nice to Grimgrin, Grimgrin turned on his allies, the people who brought him into the fight as a 3rd villain. He turned on them to join Johnny, and those 2 then teamed up. And then when the nuke was going to go off, Johnny's plan was to absorb all of its energy, but he didn't know if he could do it and live. So Grimgrin then said, no, you save everyone else. I'll absorb the blast, and I'll do, what you wanted to do. And that didn't sit well with Johnny. He was very cautious about it, because it's like, well, this guy could say he's going to do it and then not do it. Where if I'm here, I know I can do it, but also I don't want someone else to die. So sure enough, the guy actually, Grimgrin actually succeeds in stopping the blast, but there's no body. And the blast erupts, and, obvious comic book cliche, there is no body, so maybe he's not dead, but maybe he is. So that was start to finish, basically Grimgrin's origin, his antagonistic story with Johnny. It was a great. I had fun. I had fun as a writer and as a DM managing that relationship with Johnny. Any thoughts you guys want to interject on that? Any commentary?
I mean, I was gonna say I enjoyed watching that story arc. I know it wasn't directly one that I was a part of, but I got to witness some of it from a player's side. I know that the player himself who played Johnny really enjoyed that, and it was really interesting because Johnny is the type of character that, he's not going to kill the bad guy. He's going to try and help the bad guy get better or reform. That's kind of how he tends to operate most of the time. And I believe he kind of took on that role for Grimgrin once everything kind of settled after, I believe Grimgrin was taken to prison, but I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure
he was taken to prison, and then through the villain's connections, one of the villain's connections, he got him out to be put into a lab for experimentation.
Again?
Yes.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah. That's all set up for season 2.
So I guess Return of the Grimgrin, but like I know that.
No. I'm sorry. Yeah. That you guys found out in season 1, but the villain, is the guy who did it was Clarion, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So he used his connections to. That's why when Grimgrin made a return, Clarion was the reason for that. Clarion was the one that orchestrated him going from prison into a lab, and then from the lab he would be experimented on and tested, and all kinds of houses and magics of wonders that have gone on there. So it might not be the end of Grimgrin in those terms, but it also might be the start of new supervillains.
All right.
But yeah.
Well, that sounded great. It's a great story. I can't wait to hear more about that when your season 2 of this goes on. I mean, you have more antagonists and whatnot to share with us, share with the public. But I think that's a good point here. We should call it a wrap.
Yeah. I have our links in the descriptions if you want to follow us, Benefactor on Twitch or on YouTube. Myself, here's my YouTube. I have a similar one on Rumble. And Lady Potato, you're still a ghost, right?
Correct.
All right.
Well, I would like to say though on that, the first full length episode movie of the Starfinder campaign I'm in is up and posted. Please bear with me as I am getting used to YouTube. I didn't realize I couldn't cut it and clip it if it hit a certain time limit. So apologies for any viewers here that is like, why is it so long? Working on it. Please bear with me.
Yeah. I've still meaning to watch it because I've just been having a hectic schedule. So it's like that's something I wanted to watch and tune in and listen to. But all right. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for listening. Raj in the chat. Your insight is always welcome. Some point we're going to have you on here. You're going to be an interesting guy to talk to on here for sure. But all right. Thank you guys. Have a good weekend and peace out.
Later.